first of all, thank you so much for being at Coda, and thank you so much for being at what we call the Genius Inside studio.
So thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me, and it's fantastic organization in terms of being done. It's like really incredible. If you ask me in terms of like what I'm looking for, it's always the team because of execution. So why startup fail or succeed, in my view, it's always about execution.
Okay.
And execution means finding the right market, finding the go-to-market strategy, finding who is your like profile of the customer, sales, raising money, etc., etc. So it's all this combined, all of the things.
Lead with vision, inspire with innovation. Enter the Genius Inside.
What I'd really like to understand from you is a couple of questions that relate to investing in Web3. So the first one is, what do you look when you're investing? Second, in terms of not just the team or the entrepreneur, but also what do you think are the game-changing ideas that are up in the market? The second one is what are your, I don't want to call it cut-loss ratios, but what's your decision making in terms of when do you have to drop a project, even if you have to do a cut loss? And the third one is, with the integration of AI and blockchain, and to a certain extent a lot of overhype, what would you recommend investors to avoid? So these are the three questions.
Oh, wow, that's cool. Okay, let's start with the first one. So first one was about what I'm looking for, right?
Yes.
Well, you said about the team to avoid, but I cannot avoid because it's all about the team. If you ask me in terms of like what I'm looking for, it's always the team because of execution. So why startup fail or succeed, in my view, it's always about execution.
Okay.
And execution means finding the right market, finding the go-to-market strategy, finding who is your like profile of the customer, sales, raising money, etc., etc. So it's all this combined, all of the things. Regarding the some of like more like Web3 specific, so we are focusing more on the bridge between Web2 and Web3. So that's my whole vision. My whole vision is to bridge these two, and that's why we work with corporations also. On the, like we have a little bit of consulting as well. So we work with corporations, and from the Web3 point of view, so we are looking for B2B startups. So that's my sweet spot, and I love B2B because it's also very like sustainable business model from that perspective.
Yes.
While retail is more in consumer apps, they are more like goes with these cycles.
Yes.
In B2B, you have like a very different, more sustainable growth. So from that perspective, as an investor, you want to make money.
Yeah.
Right. So, and we also see a lot of corporate adoption that finally comes from the institutions and also enterprises, and that's something that is still to grow. So there is a big gap on the market, and that's where it's like we are focusing on. So as soon as the startup is solving the real problem, so it's not we launch a token or we launch some NFTs and we will make money. No, it's as soon as it's real problem on the market and they have a sustainable business model, then of course like you look to the team. So if the team is great in execution, how do you really assess? So that's something that everyone talks about, but sometimes some investors and also startups sometimes forget. So because once you talk about the execution is traction, but it's not just traction, but traction in dynamic. So what was like when they started? So what was they created? What is the speed of getting these tractions, and what is like the tractions today, And from today, you follow up usually as an investor also like a couple of months after. So that's your due diligence. So you see the dynamic. So if the founders, they say something that, okay, this is in our roadmap, so you want to see that being executed. Because if they don't execute, you try to see why they didn't execute. And here is you kind of like understand if they're able to make the right decisions, on the speed, right? So, and go into the right direction, and also if they are able to execute. So that's what I mean by execution, and yeah.
Good. Good. And this leads to a question on metrics and KPIs, and even because Web 2 really gives you a lot of metrics like CAC for customer, or just like MRR and so on. In the case of enterprise blockchain, what specific metrics do you look into to see the progress of your startup or the progress of your investments from a target perspective?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Obviously, you have a little bit different KPIs and metrics in terms of Web3 and Web 2. But Web3, it's all about engagement. But from the point of view, if you look to B2B space, it's more like sales. So, and the sales are very same metrics, conversions, sales cycle. It's all the same comparing to the Web 2. But I would say that the most important thing once you look at B2B is that the startups are having not just conversations with corporations, especially in early stage, because I'm early stage investor, right? So it's pre-seed and seed, and at pre-seed you sometimes even don't have a product. So that's more about the team that we talked previously. But once you look at seed stage, so you want to see that there are pilots executed, and you want to also see the potential of being a contracting. So there has to be something after the pilot.
Okay.
And what we see right now actually is, like, I'm just remembering one of the startup that they've been kind of like long time to market, but once they passed the sales cycle, they started to make a lot of money. So that's like that's exporting business. That's very interesting for stablecoin with stablecoins payments. And once they hit that, it's like boom. Yeah. So that's where you want to invest, because like you wanna have that, right?
Exactly. You want to have that target.
Yeah.
What are your sources of target scouting? Is that a secret source?
It's a secret source. But what I can say that I've been in venture capital for a while. So I've been all my life in venture capital. So from my 20 years old, that's my area. So people know me from that point of view. They know that I'm investing. So referrals comes
naturally.
like all the time. So that's something that is obviously sometimes conferences also help, sometimes exposure also helps, but most of it actually it's referrals one by one, and yeah.
Okay. What would you say are the relevant reputational practices that get you the referrals? Because to get a referral, you need to have a good reputation.
That's true.
So what would you, if somebody's watching this, and somebody's just, starting, they've made some money, they want to invest, but they want to do it in good practices, let's put it this way. What kind of advice would you give someone that is starting to invest and wants to build a reputation of a good investor? Sometimes a good investor doesn't mean that he invests in everything. It just means that he invests wisely, and he also says no kindly. So what kind of reputational good practices would you present?
One word: trust.
Okay.
And trust is built over time, and that means that you build relationships with people, and you being honest, transparent what you say, you execute what you say. That's something that is general for any business relationships. Why someone is winning on the market and someone is not, that's mainly about the behavior and those relationships, how you nurture those relationships. From the investing point of view, there is also a couple of things that people look for smart money. So if someone is just starting, for example, as an angel investor to invest, or going to work in venture capital and needs to scout and needs to, that's a lot about what do you provide except money? Because money, there are many people with money, but what can you give in terms of value add? And that's something that you also build over time, because people say they will bring you contacts. People say, there's like some jokes even like you always see in social media, like VCs say we will help you out, and then they just disappear, right? So that's, and they don't help. So once you are becoming a value add to the startup, then they remember you, and they will refer you as a startups. So that's one of the things that works really, really well.
So what you'd say is pay forward and keep your worth as your bond.
Yeah. It's a long-term game. It's a long-term game. Even so, we are in Web3, we see a lot of those, like, which is like hype or pump and dump schemes, where it's like more like short-term. But in terms of venture capital is a long game. It's a 10-year, like if you invest, you wait for 10 years. But it's the same with relationships. You need to keep those relationships for. It's like it's business, and it takes time to develop. And being in venture capital since my 20 years old, it helps. It helps.
Yes. What other possible pieces of advice would you give to someone that is, let's say in their 20s and wants to get into the VC industry, or just becoming an investor, apart from the reputation, keep your word, your bond, but also giving some good advice on, for instance, the sources, finding the right sources to investigate / research, and even to connect with the right people. Because I'm sure that you've had good and bad sources of knowledge, and I'm sure in some days you connected extremely well with certain excellent people, and some others were, they were probably providing a lot of, as you said, hype.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I will start from the first part, how to break into venture capital. I would not say this question like this. I would say, do you need to break into venture capital?
Some people want to be a venture capitalist for some reason. Yeah,
but most of the times what I see, and there are many young people that comes to me and ask me for internship, for example. That's one way to get into, obviously, and I really recommend to take an internship first, because what people think about venture capital is completely different. It's not like there is this kind of picture. Venture capital is like you are rich, you are making a lot of money, you're it's a long-term game. That's the reality. And even if you work in VC or as being a GP yourself, you don't see any money for 10 years until the startup exit. So that's the reality. So if the money is the most important, then I would say go to sales. So that would be you sell, you get commission, so that's very quick. But if the person is really interested, so first of all, get an internship. If you are young, try to find some small venture capital firms and ask just directly, I wanna work with you. So that's really works. For me, my path was completely different.
Okay.
It's a very non-traditional. Usually, you go to venture capital, not even from the internship, but you get into as being a founder. You sold your company for a really big amount, and big amount we say multi-million. And then you go to venture capital.
Right.
That's the typical path. Or there is another path, investment banking. You've been an analyst in investment banking, and then you get to venture capital. So that's the two very traditional paths. But then there is like life hacks, right? So that's you can get. So yeah, and one of them is getting internship is not in well-known venture capital, because well-known venture capital will not hire you. That's
Of
period.
course,
Yeah. So you can get to the small venture capital, you can make your track record there, but then you need to work on your track record, which is very hard. So you need to hard to scout, you need to get good deals, you need to be in very good analytical skills, you need to understand the business as well. And being 20 years old, not having this business experience, maybe you would need to get that experience.
Exactly.
There is a couple of the things that you would need to have in mind. And regarding, there was a second part of your question about
which is the networking and the understanding of the sources of knowledge.
the sources of the knowledge. Yes. So the networking part, I think, yeah, conferences such as Coda. So thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me. And it's actually it's fantastic organization in terms of being done. It's like really incredible. So such conferences which are small as well, not very like overcrowded, I think is much better for networking, especially for newcomers. Why? Because you can actually build relationships. You can follow up with people. People will remember you, and you can build those relationships. That's very important. Not the quantity, but the quality. So that's something that I would focus on. Regarding knowledge base, yeah, like lots of newcomers, especially like in venture capital, like interns, or like I've been working with some, and you see like they use Google first links and oh, that's my research. No, that's not the research. So there are two things. There is something that is very important in Web3 to stay updated. You need to know news, and news in Web3 it's Twitter or podcasts, so which we are doing right now as well. So and conferences, but it depends on, because some conferences are better in quality, some not. It depends, but Twitter and podcast is what is now, what is relevant today. And it's very important for Web3, specifically for Web3, not for Web2. So you need to always stay updated. And the other part is more analytical part, like from the knowledge perspective and more like reports. So what are reports? So there are trustable sources, and you need to identify first what are the trustable sources. So there's PitchBook for venture capital, for example. There is CB Insights for venture capital.
Yes.
There are TechCrunch is very good for recent deals as well, so you can track what has the recent deals been. Then you go to Web3, and there is obviously Coinbase has amazing reports. There are i16z, obviously, from the venture capital.
Yes, and Chain Analysis has some good reports as well.
Yeah, Chain Analysis.
CB Insights used to have block data, but they just folded the operation for some reason. And they were really focused on just Web3 and blockchain.
Yeah, but they're still very good for venture capital specifically. So, and PitchBook as well, so you can understand a little bit. So there is also Galaxy, the venture capital. So they have a digital assets, but they also have venture capital, and they combine kind of like very good reports. So I would look to those as well to understand where is like the market goes.
Yes.
So that's more like already like big picture from the investing perspective. And then you just go to Twitter. And by the way, that's how you also return into our first question. How do you also see who is the team? That's like you also follow on the Twitter. You see a little bit more about them. That's also kind of a due diligence part.
Great. Any final words about Coda? Thank you very much for the very nice compliments on Coda. We're really happy to have you here and hope that we can have you next year. But any advice on or any new technologies or any new areas of Web3 and blockchain that you'd like to explore?
Actually, I found it very good topics. I looked at the agenda, very good topics. I already also said some good words about organization as well. And the way it's also done, that's exactly quality over quantity. So, and I think this is what we also need for education part. That's also what we need to bring these amazing old people here. So I think you are in very good direction at this moment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Violetta, and thanks for your wonderful interview.
Thank you.
And I'll just say goodbye for now. Thank you.
Thank you.